Uh, hey, welcome back to Happy Little No Trees. I'm here today with Alexander McKee, and we're going to be discussing some of his films, his award-winning shorts, and kind of get at the heart of the relationship between the director, producer, and the colorist, and kind of see if we can understand their mind a little bit better so that we can be a better colorist for them in the future. But anyways, Alexander, it's a pleasure to have you with us today. Uh,
Thank you so much for having me. I certainly appreciate it more than you know. I love talking shop in any and all capacities, so this is great.
Yeah, well, just to get started, I mean, seen that you've done a variety of short films. The one I really liked was a Husk, the concept of using the spoils of the undead zombie
Yes.
apocalypse to have that better, healthier, happier life.
Yes.
So it seems like you've touched a little bit more on the horror side of things. Uh, and then as well
Yeah.
as Peter Man was an interesting entry.
Yeah, and that is what a dichotomy to bring up. Somehow both food related in the worst way possible. But yeah, it was horror was really my entry into being able to go from, directing on the side while doing PA and AD work and
Mhm.
then to launch the full-time directing career. So horror was really my kickstart into yeah, that full-time directing career. And then I was super lucky when those couple Peter Man projects came about because I was saying finally I can get some comedy into my reel as well.
So you've been like you've switched over and been primarily directing for how many years now?
Oh gosh, about almost 10. Almost 10
Yeah.
because yeah, my Here Be Monsters, which was a horror short film. I was 23 when doing that, and I turned 33 this year. So almost 10 years of
Nice.
doing that full time.
Nice.
Yeah.
And do you feel like you get, I mean, I know the industry is constantly on the move and changing, but how many projects a year do you usually work on or prepare for or shooting?
It can really vary. I mean, last year, thankfully, I ended up doing 28 different projects in 2024. Um, this year, unfortunately, given the wildfires and everything, has really stalled quite a lot of things.
Right.
So it's almost impossible to find an average, but that's what's fun, is because I do feel when I have a lower average on a year, that means that the projects have been going on longer. And that's always the variation I'm looking for as well. It's for someone like me, it's good for my brain to say either you're directing two projects a month
Mhm.
or it's going to take 6 months for both these things that you're doing. So it's hard to determine an average, but I'm always happy with anything.
So as a director, you're kind of hands-on with being able to, in most projects, in most senses, put together the team that you're going to be working with from
Mhm.
throughout the entire pre-production through production, and then probably as well as dealing on the post-production side as well, right?
Absolutely. Totally.
And so with that, as being director, like in my mind, it's always I used to be an assistant superintendent at a golf course, like in a past life, and like I know what it takes to like I had a crew of like 35 people that I managed on a daily basis, and so like I
Right.
know what it takes to delegate tons of tasks out to specialized people.
Hmm.
So would you say that you tend to hire or bring on into the projects as much as possible the same people that you can trust, or is it kind of just how it works, or
It can always depend on the project. I mean, it's so funny. You do one gig and you work with a fantastic group of people, and you can't imagine doing anything else without them. But of course, they have their own schedules. And when I'm working with a client for a commercial, let's say, um, you know, they're not wanting to change their timeline, and I can't always get the team that I always love to have on the exact same day. But really, you nailed it on the head, though, by just saying those specialized positions. Above all, I love working with people who are better in their field than I ever could be. That is where I think creativity really stems from. I think that's where inspiration can come from. You don't want to be working, uh, you don't want to be working with, let's say, a cinematographer and you're going, well, maybe I could do this better. No, you want someone that's going to elevate your game
Hmm.
as a director. And that to me is always the beauty of just being on set with talented people no matter what.
Nice. So with that, for this conversation being more focused on what is jokingly referred to from people in my industry as we're the last forgotten people to get hired. And usually budgets have run out or things are super tight, and then it's like you needed a colorist. I'm like, you probably like if you were thinking about doing good audio during pre-production, the pipeline of picture formation could
Absolutely.
have been dialed in ahead of time as well.
Hmm.
Do you usually feel like you're in that weird place and position where some positions on the post-production side are kind of brought in later, or is that something you want figured out before you get into filming?
Given the amount of experience that I've had, I mean, because even at the age of 12, I was running around with a tiny little DV camcorder
Mhm.
to make movies with my friends. So through so much trial and error, and of course, just growing up and learning more about positions, I have always strived to not forget about anyone, no matter how far down the line in the process it might be, because I hate the last minute scramble. Um, I consider pre-production in so many ways the most important part to plan for what's going on in post-production.
Mhm.
Because I've found too many times, and I'm sure you've experienced this too, where you are being brought in at the last minute and the least amount of budget, but for whatever reason, the client still thinks they need the same amount of quality for the same price that they are probably underbidding on. So I hate to avoid that situation, or I should say I love to avoid that situation whenever possible. I'm trying to stay as forward thinking constantly as I can.
Nice. So in your 10 years, you've probably worked with several colorists then across the projects, or do you tend to?
Yeah, just a couple handful. Not too much because sometimes it does have to fall to me.
Mhm.
Um, and that's where, like I said, that's sort of the more technical aspect of it. I certainly don't know as well as when on a lot of the commercials I've been able to work with colorists a bit more intimately. But it's only just been a handful. But I'm always ready and willing to collaborate with new people. So I hope that that continues in the future.
Nice. Yeah. Do you feel like, and not to put you in a position where you feel like you're ratting on anyone that you've worked with or anything like that, but like, do you feel like those are when you've worked with a colorist, do you feel like you've gotten out of it what you wanted? Like, or do you feel like there was always something lacking or like you couldn't get across your vision?
No, I think I've been very fortunate that anything I've ever wanted to achieve uh, has happened. I liken it similarly to a lot of the time when after we do a shot, an actor will come up to me and say, "Are you sure that that was good enough? Do you want to do it again?" And I always say, I mean, trust me, we would still be working on it if I wasn't 100% thrilled.
Yeah.
And I feel that way about working with anyone in any stage of production. Is that let's do it till we get it right. I don't believe in compromising quality, and that actually really goes back to that sort of forethought of preparation where let's always budget enough time to make sure that I can get these ideas out and we can work together. And then hopefully there's that room to play where if we were collaborating on something, It's like I said, I want people that are better in their fields to be elevating my game. I want the time to be able to hear your input, your ideas. If you're saying, well, maybe that's too bright there, too dark there. What about more blue, less blue? All of that. That's really what I love. That's what I like to play with. So I'm very fortunate. I've always been happy with the results that I've gotten working with colorists.
Nice. That's good. That's good. Hopefully, and nobody that has worked with you is watching, and you. And like when I was pitching this idea of doing this series, I was like, man, I don't know if I'll get people to say any bad stories or anything because I'm assuming people they know that I've worked with will want to see.
Right. Thankfully, I'm full of mostly good stories,
Yeah,
especially with cast and crew. When it comes to client stories, that can be a bit different, as I'm sure you understand.
yeah, totally. Uh, do you have a horror story when it comes to color?
I'm trying to think. Um, I wish I could lie to make something up on the spot, to add some drama and entertainment. But really, um, well, actually, maybe the only horror story I have is um, the first time that I was really working with a colorist independent of just like me doing it or just maybe consulting someone. But I think that so much of, and I'm sure you can understand this, is that like your job is so affected by what the DP is doing.
Mhm.
And for one commercial, we had a baked in LUT into our shoot. And I realized, I mean, of course, it looks great on the monitor. And then I became worried about um, has any option to play in post production been sacrificed at all by doing this? Because suddenly it was like, it I likened it to if I just wanted to do one take for every shot, and if I was getting rid of any options down the line. Thankfully, everything did work out really beautifully and everyone involved was happy. But it was an almost horror story. We got close. It was a good ending at the end of it, but it could have been really terrifying. But it was a great learning experience. I'm happy that I went through it to now know. I personally prefer to shoot in log. If someone wants to show me a really great LUT, it's become now more commonplace for me to use that as a great frame of reference. But let's save those decisions for really a professional who can we can play with it right at the very end.
Bridging on that, have you ever brought in a colorist during pre-production to work with the DP on creating a show lot that you can have as this is kind of where we're creatively going or thinking, so that they're shooting into something that is what the footage will be treated as at the end of the day?
I have not, but it is funny that you say that because in watching your videos in preparation for this, and of course, it's gotten my mind just on coloring in general, and it is something I would want to explore more and more. I think that that is a far more critical relationship between colorist and DP. People don't realize that, like how important that is to creating a really beautiful final image, I think, and to have them putting their heads together from the beginning. So I have not done that, but I really hope to do so in the future because I think that's just invaluable.
Nice. Yeah, I totally agree. I've gotten that same horror story where I've been given baked Rec 709 footage paired
Right.
with drone foot like to match cameras too, and it was just like, yeah, there's limitations, but you struggle through it, and at the end of the day, we got it done. But
Right.
yeah, I was not really happy
Oh, I can imagine.
when
I
I came to my desk and they were like, "We're stuck with this," and I'm like, "Ah,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Because
because
that's
it
the other
was good."
thing that uh, I love about your position in the filmmaking process is that it really speaks to the idea that we need, as sort of an industry, we need to totally forget about this idea of fixing it in post. Color grading is not a band-aid you can put on everything. It's not like this big blanket filter that you want to pull over your footage. It's just not how it should go at all, in my opinion, because it needs to be as fun and as experimental as any other part in the process.
Yeah, that's exactly what like I when it's you get good footage and you think through that whole process. Because like uh what I've likened it to and tried to explain it to people is there's the macro look that I'm gonna make that it's gonna cover all the footage, but then there's the individual shot balancing, and like the closer I get to the start of the chain, the more I'm really tweaking and affecting what was happening on set and
Yes.
everything to convert this frozen moment in time to be presented on whatever display.
Hmm.
And it is this chain, and every decision matters. Whether you put the where you put the lens filter for bloom, is it on the camera
Right.
or is it in post? Like
Yes,
different. If it's
exactly.
already in the camera in post,
Right.
like I don't need more. But I
Yeah.
wish I didn't have to dance around it.
Exactly. Well, I mean, what's so great about what you just said, sort of working macro to micro, and as you're exploring director colorist relationships, that's so similar to how I think about the story of an entire piece. There is the entire film, music video, commercial, whatever you call it. There's individual, then there's three acts, then there's the sequences within that, the scenes within those sequences, and then down what's the story of the individual shot. And you need that macro perspective, but you also have to think of each and every individual moment. So I love that. That's one of my favorite ways to view things, and it's so cool to hear about you viewing it the same way.
Yeah, it's all like, especially if you go back into the olden days and you think about how film was done and the process for making decisions on your chemical soup.
Right,
Uh,
right.
like whether to bleach bypass, every step along the way has this impact on that final picture. And for film, especially like when you're even it comes down to the bulb of the projector in the theater. Like, is it a
Sure.
bulb that's
Yes.
on its last legs, or is it a new bulb in our modern xenon bulb? Like that's going to have a huge impact on that final view. There's a YouTube video out there on all the different scans of the movie Seven and
Oh,
why it looks totally every scan looks different.
oh,
Every
I'm gonna have to look that up. That sounds
uh,
fascinating.
but it kind of gets into that whole thing of with film, everything is a decision. Everything changes that visual perception down to, I would argue, uh, down to how, when we think about memory colors and stuff like that, water, blues, green skin, and all that, we may have, as a humanity, have very similar memory colors, but like I think about sunsets a little bit differently. I grew up in Chicago. I live in San Diego. Sunsets in San Diego are way different than sunsets in Chicago.
Sure,
And the
absolutely.
colors are different. And so that memory of what a sunset should look like, totally
Hmm.
different.
Hmm.
And if
And
you've
that's
never lived anywhere else,
right, right.
uh,
For me, that's so much like when working with a colorist, that is just those initial conversations are part of what is so much fun, is sort of saying, maybe it's comparing memories, or maybe
mm,
like using an example of a sunset is so great. What is the specific color tone, mood of the sunset in this shot? What story are we trying to tell slightly? What needs to be tweaked? And again, it just speaks to that, how that needs to sort of represent, again, it's part of the whole. It's another detail added that's going to be representing this entire story somehow. And it's bizarre when you break it down like that, but it shows how uh integral this job is to the finished product.
yeah, I mean, I break it down like that all the time because I once started a dissertation for a PhD program on that. Not on color specifically, but more on the unique relationship and literary, like when we're writing, and this
Mhm.
comes back to even just story and directing. Um, the idea that when I read a book, a lot of the writing that the author put into it and the authorial intent includes anything he's ever read, anything he's ever written, and our shared literary blend over.
Yes.
That's why we
Yeah.
have hyperlinks and emails. Like, you read an article and it links to some other article. It's assuming you know that history and that background. And so, uh, have you? This comes coming back to color. When you have two people that are completely different and on different, have you struggled to find at times that commonality to be able to communicate that in your mind, this scene, this should have this emotion, and in my mind, it's this color and it's this feel, and to get that across to your colorist and to the end point. Does that make sense?
That, no, absolutely. And I've encountered that with a colorist previously and almost with every other person on the crew or in the cast too. We all come in uh, with a certain bias towards something, and it goes back to how I said it's great to work with people that like that slice of the work, they're experts in that. And they're going to come in with different ideas and different notions, and navigating that butting of the heads is tough no matter what field you're in. It's you do it within your family, with friendships all the time too. But eventually, what I'm always focused on is that I got to strip away any ego I have. And if you can really listen to what could be a great idea, to be open to that is so important, because at the end of the day, I don't feel like I'm serving myself with anything I've directed. It's about serving the story. And if we can keep that as our common ground instead of what I want versus what they want, what does the story need? And that you have to approach that differently with every single person you meet in life. And it's part of my job, I think, also to just know who I'm working with, even if just for a little bit, saying, "Hey, how are you? Nice to meet you. What's been going on? How's life?" I don't ever like coming into a situation and just saying, "Okay, boom, let's get straight to work." No, because we are all creative. That's why we're in this field. There are expressions of creativity that we have to get across,
Yeah.
and to bridge that gap when collaborating with people is incredibly important. I don't believe in just showing up and doing a job and leaving. I have to know the people that I'm working with, even just a little bit. Because, I've also worked with some very unfriendly people, that especially back when I was a PA, and I know how it feels on the receiving end of that. And so to just be calm, kind, get to know everyone a little bit, and then you know how to navigate those inevitable conflicts when you're both, I won't even say arguing your viewpoints. You're discussing two very valid viewpoints of, let's say I'm saying it needs to be more desaturated. You're arguing for saturation, and then we find what serves the story.
Yeah. That's good. Do you have anything that's coming up that you'd like to promote or that's on your docket or?
I'm gonna think there's something, but there are other team members I would need to check with, other producers, and that's always the tricky part. I'm trying to think. Otherwise, yeah, we we don't need to include this in the final edit, but it's just been such a crazy start of the year that like we're fighting to get anything in the pipeline right now. So there's something that I would love to promote, but yeah, I need to check in with the rest of the team on the whole sort of marketing strategy on that. I wish I could. Fun.
Is there anything you'd like to say to any potential future colorists that you would be working with?
Oh gosh. I think that both colorist and director need to come into any room knowing they are you're speaking different dialects of the same language,
Mhm.
and once again, it's about finding that common ground. I believe that a lot of filmmaking is about compromise because ultimately it's not about um, any ego. It has to be about what's serving the story because those are the ones that I think that last forever. I think so much, all right, I should say, I think so many directors need to know how to better speak to colorists. Instead, it's easy to come in with a plan in mind, and preparation is great, but to have this sort of unhinged specificity instead of leaving room to play, everyone needs that in a creative field. And on the colorist side, I don't know. I almost want to ask you, what do you like to hear from the directors you work with?
I mean, I always like to be told on the first images that I show off, this is perfect. And then I'm like, all right, cool. We're good now. We're on the same page. We're on the same track. But yeah, like it's been interesting because I've worked with different directors, and some have been more hands-on. Other ones have been, like we work through the edit and go through it all, and they're like, yes, 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 and then you get to that last day, and you're thinking you're wrapping it up, and there's like 10,000 notes, and you're like, why didn't you say that during the first pass? Like,
Oh,
uh,
yeah,
why have you been holding on to this? So I mean, like, it's one of those things of like being when I'm working, it's like I said, like I'm trying to do macro level things up first. Let's get 80% of the way there, and slowly, like by the time we're down to the last 10%, it should just be a fun, like, oh yeah, can we do this? Can we do that? Oh,
absolutely.
that's, versus like, here's 10,000 things that need to be corrected. Uh,
Right.
a lot of that should be smoothed out and sailed through on that first day working through it, the footage. But
I hear you. I always try to say as early on as possible, let's sort of get any and all ideas out because let's not waste time down the line when saying, "Oh, let's reverse these
uh,
however many decisions, let's be honest, really upfront so that we can just keep focusing on progress and not like in exactly like you said, these 10,000 notes at the end. I can totally commiserate with you on that.
yeah, well, you're dealing with producers and people above you that have a lot invested in it as well. So uh, uh, I
That's
know
how that's how I've learned to talk to the cast and crew so well over the years, is dealing with that. That is the perfect training ground for that.
favorite movie?
Return of the Jedi.
Return of the Jedi.
Mhm.
Nice. Classic. Good choice.
Yep.
And I mean, you said you were like 33, so yeah, you're the Ewok generation.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's how it's pretty cool that, and I've told this story so many times, but that's how I got into the world of film and filmmaking. I was 4 years old, and it was when the original trilogy was being re-released in '97. And my dad took me, and he did not know what he was unleashing by having me see episode 4 for the first time in theaters.
Yeah.
And it has just been it just started driving me from such an early age, and I'm very fortunate to be here now being able to talk about these things. It's pretty wild, but I'm very, very fortunate.
The speeder chase scene is what it always had a little inkling in my heart of how do you do that? And then I
Yeah.
learned at a later age, like, oh, it's a steady cam. And like, oh, I want to learn how to do that. Like
Oh,
that seems so cool.
yes.
and that was like that is one of the first like times that I was like very engaged with how did they do that? And how
Yes.
did they shoot that?
Hmm.
And wanting to understand that.
Hmm.
I mean, and that would have been probably around six or something like 6, 8, something like
Uh-huh.
that.
It's a thing of beauty, man. I love it. So yeah, that always I love all Star Wars. Return of the Jedi is my top out of all of them. And I just have stuck with that path ever since my dad introduced me to it. And yeah, here I am today. So I
Well,
love it.
well, I'm going to just give a little Taylor to the end of the YouTube segment. You can stay on the line and we can keep chatting and just whatever works for you.
Awesome. Do whatever you need.
Yeah, this has been Happy Little No Trees. Hopefully you enjoyed this little interview with Alexander McKee. There'll be links in the description to some of his work as well as his website where you can find out more about him and his directorial exploits. But otherwise, if you like this, there's other videos that show up on the screen over here that you can click on. And hopefully we'll see you in the next one.